Jeff, welcome to episode 12 of COVID Conversations. This is our first repeat guest. Happy to have you back here. And I'm interested to learn a little bit more about what's new going on up in the Maine rental and vacation market.
Good morning, Jeff. Nice to be back. Our vacation market is somewhat interesting, as many vacation rental markets would report in. Here in Maine, we are, just a bit of a recap, we're a small agency, but we're also in a very small village located within Old Orchard Beach, the village being Ocean Park. Our typical vacation rentals run a very short season from as early as mid-June, although those are not popular weeks. July 4th week typically starts our popular season. And of course, we're pretty well done by the Labor Day weekend, particularly in a normal year, schools starting that third and fourth week of August, public schools starting third and fourth week of August. So we're pretty well done by then. So we'll really have maximized an 8 to 10 week window. Our typical rentals are 1 week. We do have 2 week and 3 week rentals. It's really what how long a renter wants to be here. But they're typically 1 week rentals. And we have a very vibrant 10-week period of time with all kinds of programs and great things. And of course, 7 miles of a world famous beach that is a natural attraction to our tourists. Here at my agency, we do about 460 rental weeks a year, and we measure that by 8, 10 in a week. If you are there for 3 weeks, that's 3 rental weeks. If you're there for 1 week, it's 1 rental week. We use that as a stat just to make sure that we're on track on the business side of it. This year, of course, with the virus, that's been very different. Our business is off, due to a number of reasons, but I'm going to cite the stat. We're off about 65% now, and that's due to a number of reasons. About 45% of our rental activity is from Canada, and it's a big market for us, as you can tell. And that border is shut down, and looks like, I believe the last time I checked that order, it was extended through the 1st of September. So Canadians are pretty well locked out. So 45% of our business goes away the minute that happens. Another percentage, a good 25 to 30% of our business is from Massachusetts. And we'll get into our restrictions at the moment, Jeff, per our governor's order, and how that affects the Massachusetts market. The governor had issued an order, and it stands for the month of July, that all renters that are not Mainers were to either take a COVID test and test negative within 72 hours of arriving here for their rental, or sign an affidavit where they would assure that they would quarantine for 14 days once they got here. As you can see, the complication on that is they're here for a week, they're supposed to quarantine for 14 days, they can't go out, they can't do anything. Well, heck, they're on vacation. So that's not a good alternative to getting a COVID test 72 hours prior. And that was for all states, with the exception of Maine, obviously, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Early on in July, the governor added New York and New Jersey to that list. So since this is people from many states may be seeing this particular broadcast, and Massachusetts as well, that requires Massachusetts to still conform to the affidavit process discussed just a few minutes ago. And Massachusetts being a fair number of our remaining business after Canada is gone, that really crimps Massachusetts renters from coming here. So we've done a couple things. A couple things to that. Number one, this order is through the 31st of July. And while I have no reason to think all or parts of this will be extended into August, our August rental market is kind of waiting to see what changes may be there. And if it's typical of this governor, she's going to wait till the last possible minute, review all the possible up-to-the-minute statistics before making any changes to this.
Has the governor or the state made COVID tests available for people who still want to come on vacation? Because I imagine the cost of a COVID test is pretty small compared to the amount of economic activity that a tourist can create.
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken or egg because the way this is set up, it presupposes that the COVID test is going to be taken before you get to Maine, wherever that may be, presumably your home state. I don't know in other states whether you can prevail upon your doctor for a test, or whether they're a standalone drive-through facilities. Here, with the consent of your primary care physician, they can set you up for a COVID test. You book an appointment just like anything else, and you get it done that way. It's not a drive-through like McDonald's where you can just decide, hey, I think I'll get a test today and go and get it. It's a little more formal than that. So the answer to your question is probably I don't have an answer to that, except that everyone's waiting. And we've adjusted some policies here. Typically, we have a cancellation policy that is fairly steep for a renter, that if they cancel anytime prior to their booked weeks, if we can re-rent at the same terms that they rented at, they lose their deposit, but their additional monies are refunded. Here we went from you could cancel anytime up to a month prior to your rental, that we adjusted that to 2 weeks. And now pretty much it's going to be the day before your occupancy. If you decide to cancel, then your rental's coming back. Now that's a rental office by rental office policy. That's our policy. That's not a state policy. I want to differentiate that from the governor's order and so on. We are not mandated to do any of that, but we're doing it to be user-friendly and, quite frankly, Jeff, to save some business for next year. With people, maybe not feeling like they had such a negative experience with our agency this year that they wouldn't want to return. And we've impressed our owners with that too. If you want these return rentals, we've got to be a lot more flexible on refunds. So that's where we're at.
So landlords have continued to be forgiving against tenants, because I remember the season hadn't quite started yet when we last spoke, and everyone was just kind of playing it by ear, figuring it out as we went. And now that things are starting to shape up and firm up as to how the season is going to look, I didn't know if landlords would change their position because they're now seeing potentially the loss of a season's worth of rental income.
That they are. And again, not everyone's been happy. Well, no one's been happy about it, frankly, including the renters. But I think for the most part, renters and landlords are looking to an idea that this is a one-year blip that we hope will not reoccur, and therefore now we're looking to salvage what we can for this year, but as importantly, looking ahead to next year and not having renters decide they're not coming back because they felt mistreated, and trying to impress landlords to understand that, particularly if it's a repeat renter that's been coming to their property. In some cases here, Jeff, renters have been coming to the same week, same property for decades. I mean, they could be a part owner, for crying out loud, by now. And so that's something we, a relationship, public relations call it, that's something we're trying to salvage and not tear apart.
You're in a very tourist-heavy area, which is, it sounds like, very dense with rental properties. Are there properties conveying at the same rate? Has the conveyance side of real estate changed at all?
Well, interesting. You should ask that. For the most part, right now, we don't have a lot of sales to report on. We're a very small market area that I practice in, anyway. And but our prices are being sustained. In some cases, selling with multiple bids for more than list price. So that market is pretty resilient right now. It'll be interesting as the season winds down whether properties may go on the market that were a bust as far as rental income was concerned, and the owners are facing putting them on the market, or perhaps we have owners that are facing economic issues elsewhere in their lives. And usually when that happens, selling of the vacation home is a typical solution to a problem that they may have in other areas. So it remains to be seen. None of that will happen, I don't believe, until the fall. Even if owners are not experiencing the rental activity that they've had in their property, owners may very well, in many cases, are coming up to use it themselves. I mean, they can do that. They have to quarantine if they're from out of state, as we stated earlier. but they've come up here. We've had owners of cottages up here since March, since really shutdowns began. They're working out of their cottage. They're staying here. They're not renting, obviously. And it's not a bad, if you have to be on lockdown from the virus, it's not a bad place to spend your time.
Has there been any news or updates regarding back to school in the fall, or is it still too soon?
Another interesting question. The latest on that was out yesterday, the day before in the news, and that like most states, control of school systems and districts and so on is locally run. And so in general, those districts are making their own decisions. But the state here is providing some guidance and suggesting that they come up with a number of plans so that wherever we find ourselves come mid-August, then whatever plan seems appropriate for the time will be implemented without a lot of scrambling and running around. So that's a non-answer to your question, Jeff. I freely admit. But I think like most areas, they're probably just, waiting on up to the minute numbers and trying to, I think everyone acknowledges what would be best for the school kids, an optimum learning experience for them. But whether that can be provided or not remains to be seen in assessment of the up-to-date statistics.
In a couple other states in New England, they have expanded their mask requirements. Previously, it was just for, I think, indoor spaces and public spaces inside, and they expanded that to masks everywhere outside as well. Up in Maine, it's less dense, but is there, do you see masks being consistently worn or consistently not worn outside in public?
Again, a timely question. The governor just 2 days ago signed an order requiring masks in all public areas, requiring them in stores. Up till now, masks have been strongly suggested, but not mandated. And that I'm sure that will have a little bit of blowback. But one, as a business owner, one of the advantages I see is that you don't have the supermarket anymore asking people or challenging people to wear masks when masks haven't been absolutely required. Now the owner of that small business is able to say, hey, it's a requirement. You have to wear it in the store. It's not, and it takes the onus off the business employees and owners, I think, a little bit. So that's probably helpful. Where the challenges will be, I don't know. When someone comes into a store and absolutely refuses to wear a mask, that'll be interesting to see where that goes. But as of 2 days ago, masks are required in virtually all public areas and certainly in stores and restaurants.
One last question. Are you seeing rental prices remain consistent, or have they dropped to try to fill vacancies?
Well, that's interesting. When our first lockdowns came back in March, there's a lot of speculating here, a lot of armchair thinking about, how is that going to depress the market? It's certainly not going to expand in terms of rental values and so on. But would it have a negative effect? And again, as indicated the last time we spoke, Jeff, no renter has really come out and asked for a deal. I know you're vacant. I know we're in this virus crisis thing. Would you take this? To the best of my knowledge, I don't do hands-on anymore. There's someone else in my office who doesn't. But to the best of my knowledge, that has not occurred. At the same time, we had owners come to us earlier and say, well, what if I discount my rent? What would that have any effect? And the fact is, if you don't conform to the COVID policies as outlined by the governor, no matter what rent you charge, they're not coming. So that dynamic has not manifested itself. So the long answer to your short question, Jeff, is no. I haven't seen any change in rental amounts on the supply or demand side.
Very good. And the restaurants and all the local businesses that really just survive off of tourism, are you seeing them having shorter business hours? Are they just closed in general? I know there are some restaurants here in Boston that just said, you know what, we're not reopening right yet because there's not enough foot traffic or people that would be interested to make it worth us reopening.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know the ins or outs of the restaurant business per se. A lot of our places on the seashore areas have outdoor dining available anyway, because there's a view or there's some other reason to be outside, and they've adapted very well. Their biggest constraint has been making sure the tables are scattered enough to provide that social distancing effect. Others, Portland area, Portland has cordoned off streets for outside dining. In some areas, some places have put out umbrellas, so they put out a canopy of some kind, and others haven't. So the ones that haven't, obviously, it's weather related, whether they can do outside dining or not. There's a robust takeout business. I think some of the delivery services, the DoorDashes and so on, are doing pretty well with that. But I'm not sure if you pinned an owner down a restaurant, I'm not sure that many of them are making a profit per se. They may be breaking even. They may be losing just less than they would if they were closed. But that'd be a question for them. But we're trying to do as much takeout as possible and keep these places afloat. So
here in the north end of Boston, which is known as sort of the Italian section of the city, there's a lot of Italian restaurants, and on Hanover Street and neighboring Salem Street, the two main sort of drags of that area, all of the restaurants that line that street have essentially taken over the entire parking lanes of both sides of the street. So when you walk up and down the street, it feels like you're in a street in another country. It's quite pleasant, actually, where they've set up these tables and the barriers to separate off between the end of the lane on the road and the seating area. And they've got people outside singing off balconies. We were up there walking around last week. It felt like it was a whole new place. And I honestly hope that lasts and is a sustainable initiative beyond current COVID times, because it was quite enjoyable to walk up and down the street there and not have cars and a lot of traffic and just people on the side. I didn't get all that close to those people, but it was happy to see all the activity going on.
I mean, in general, if you were to sit back and spitball ideas about trends that are going to emerge out of this, we could probably come up with some that will be, on the negative side. But some of the positive side may be the features such as you mentioned, closing down of streets, or at least the appropriating of areas in a street to do outside dining. I think that's something that very well may take hold. I know the Portland dining scene up here, while not on the scale of Boston's, is pretty robust. It's a pretty well-known city for good eating. And I'm sure we'll see a lot of different practices adopted as we, presumably emerge from this sometime in the future, and life as we know it starts to come back, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah. Jeff, it was great to have you for an update back on our 12th episode of COVID Conversations. Maybe we'll check in again with you in the fall just to see how things ended up settling in the rental market and with tourism in general. And enjoy the rest of your summer up there. It's quieter, so I don't know if that's a benefit for you or if that's if you look forward to the tourist season. But thank you for joining us on this episode.